Kum Len Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Chaf and Aleph. Just to recap what we did so far, the Mishnah tells us that if somebody accepts Naziris and Chutz La'aretz, they have to repeat it again in Eretz Yisrael. You have to go to Eretz Yisrael anyway to attend in order to bring your kabbalah, so you have to repeat it again. We had an argument Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. According to Beis Shammai, you only have to repeat the minimum of a Nazir for 30 days, regardless of how long your Nazir actually was. And Beis Hillel says no, that if you took on a lengthy period of Naziris, you have to repeat the entire exercise when you're in Eretz Yisrael. And we basically explained that the crux of the argument is as follows. There are three kinds of tumah. There is when you touch the tumah, which is nega. Then there is oil, where you're hovering over it. So if let's say in the cemetery, touching a grave or hovering over it, you become tamei. If it's over a goyish grave, only if you touch it, not if you're hovering, it becomes halacha. And then you have a third kind, which is avira, the airspace itself. And where that would be, if you're inside a box, you're not hovering over any particular grave, but you're still inside the air. So we had them, and we explained the Gemara. The argument of Shammai Hill is as follows: the problem when you're making a zira as a chutz la'aretz is that it's as if you're making a cemetery, and so and basically the Gemara thinks that the crux of the argument is according to Beis Shammai. When we were geyser at Eretz, we think that dead bodies strewn all over, or parts of dead bodies strewn all over, then we're only metame touching it or hovering over it, but not if you are not in the airspace. So because it is so lenient, therefore we only then make you repeat 30 days. According to Beis Hillel, the avir, the airspace is also tummy. So if you're inside a box, you still become tummy. In a cemetery, you wouldn't because you're not hovering, but in chutz la'aretz you are because you're in the airspace. So then we are strict and we say that you have to repeat the whole exercise. That's how some Rishonim learn. Others learn exactly the opposite, but let's move on. The Gemara then brings a story about Hilani Amalka, the queen, that her son went to army, so she became a Nazir for 7 years, then she went to Israel and then repeated the 7 years, and at the very end of the 7 years, she became Tamei, so she had to repeat it again. Turned out to be 21 years she was a Nazir. She didn't want to repeal it in any way, so she was a Nazir for 21 years. Rabbi Yehuda came along and says, no, it was only 14 years. So now we're going to try to understand why Rabbi Yehuda argues with the Tana of our Mishnah and believes that the story was that Helani Malka was only a Nazir for 14 years. Because there are really two ways of understanding Rabbi Yehuda. Either Rabbi Yehuda is saying that we follow Beis Shammai. So what happened was she was a Nazir for 7 years, went to Israel, and in Israel she had to be a Nazir for 30 days, and then towards the end of the 30 days, she became Tamei. So then she cancels, but she doesn't only cancel the 30 days, she cancels the entire 7 years because the 30 days is seen as an extension of the 7 years. So she had to repeat 7 years, so a total of 14 years and 30 days. But if the other way of learning is that he holds like Beis Hillel, that the 7 years of chutz la'aretz you have to repeat in Yisrael, and she never became tamei, so therefore it was 14 years. So that's what we're going to query. Which one is it? Says Yimari Boyu on Daf Chafam at Aleph. We are up to 4 lines on the top. Kulan about Gemara. Ma'ise behelani hamal. Says Yimari Boyu. We're trying to understand. Kishenit mas. Is it talking about that 7 years of chutz la'aretz, 30 days in Israel, and then she became tamei toward the end of 30 days, and this follows Beis Shammai. So therefore, because the end of the 30 days it cancels the entire 7 years. It's considered as an extension. Ideal, perhaps b'shalei she never became tamei, and Rabbi Yehuda follows Beis Hillel. The liba the Beis Hillel, and Rabbi Yehuda follows Beis Hillel. Toshma coming here. It says also la'aretz she went to Yisrael, but ruled Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel ruled should take Nazira 7 years of chutz la'aretz. She has to repeat the exercise 7 years in Yisrael, the chulu, etc. Now, so and then this is the balance of our Mishnah. The problem is if we follow the first version that was Beis Shammai, so 7 years of chutz la'aretz, 30 days in Eretz Yisrael, and then became tamei, so they had to cancel it. It became another 7 years. So really, it was 14 years and 30 days, and yet our Mishnah says that it was only 14 years. Why does it say 14 years? Should be 14 years and 30 days. You want to be very pedantic. In fact, the other Yerushalmi, it says it could be we just round it off to the nearest number, and 14 years. It could be like Beis Shammai, 14 years. We're 3 lines above the Mishnah. So therefore, we say that Yehuda actually holds like Beis Shammai. Yehuda holds like Beis Hillel, and therefore we have an accurate 14 years, 7 years of chutz la'aretz, 7 years at Yisrael. There was no tumah involved whatsoever. However, Tanya Namhachi, we also learned the Raisa, but this Tanya Namhachi is different than other places. This Tanya does not really support what we just said. Here we say, Yehuda says, Mishum Rabbi Lezer. The Amakra, Rabbi Lezer says that if you, let's say, took a long period of Naziris and you end up becoming tummy towards the end, you don't have to repeat the whole exercise. You only repeat the last 30 days, because you learn from the Pasuk, it only lasts 30 days. But the Amakra says the Pasuk, Zoy Toidas HaNazir, this is the laws of a Nazir. And the Torah says, and it says that the day that he completes your Nazir. If you became tummy on the day you complete your Naziris, you only do Toidas HaNazir. You only have to repeat 30 days. The Torah says, if you become tummy on the 30th day, 10 loy Toidas Nazir. You only become tummy you only have to repeat 30 days, which is like Rabbi Lezer we learned earlier on. So therefore, it comes out that Rabbi Yehuda says that Heloni Malka became tummy at the end of the second 7 years, and yet. Whichever way you follow, if only becomes tummy for 30 years, it could be 14 years, 7, and did become tummy, but that's not a problem because of the last 30 days. Or we follow Beis Shammai. If it would follow Beis Shammai, it wouldn't be 14 years at all. If you follow Beis Shammai, it would be 7 years in Chutz La'aretz, and then 30 days in Eretz Yisrael, and then it became tummy at the end of the 30 days, you'd only have to repeat another 30 days. No, it would be 7 years and 60 days. So obviously Rabbi Yehuda cannot be following Beis Shammai, must be following Beis Hillel. So the Taina Mahachis only support our conclusion that Rabbi Yehuda is following Beis Hillel, but but does not agree with our Mishnah that was what do you call it? But it's not exactly saying the same thing. There's a different reason why it cannot be Beis Shammai, not because it's 14 years and 30 days, because it actually would be 7 years and 60 days. Okay, we are up to the Mishnah, and we're moving on. So the Mishnah continues and says an interesting case here. We have it in Bava Basra, this concept in other places in Ksuvas. When two pairs of witnesses contradict each other, or you have one pair of witnesses where they contradict each other, but there's a certain amount where they're overlapping. How do we view overlapping? Do we say they're generally contradicting each other and therefore we cancel each other out? Or do we say where they overlap, that's a valid aegis? And the same thing within one pair. You have two agents. One guy says this amount. We had it in a case where one person says he borrowed $100, the other one says he borrowed $200. Do we say that they cancel each other out? Or do we say that at least on $100 they overlap, so we should believe for $100? So the Mishnah will talk about the Naziris. Misha Hoyu Shteikite Edim Meidas Oisadu. Two groups of Edim coming to testify. Group A, Elu Meidim Shenazar Stein. Group A says that they accepted upon herself the way Moses Shein learned 2 sets of Nazirisim. Rashi learns 2 years of Naziris. And the Elu Meidim Shenazar Chamesh. And the second pair comes along and says 5 sets of Nazirisim or 5 years of Naziris. Beis Shammai says Nechel Ka'edus. Beis Shammai says, well, they cancel each other out. Finished. They ain't Naziris. And surely if it had been one group of ages and they contradict each other to throw it out. Beis Hillel says, Yesh b'chal chomesh time. They overlap at least in 2 Nazirisim. Shei Nazir time. So 2 years he definitely has to be a Nazir, and the other 3 years, no. What exactly he himself is saying, so the Rosh brings 2 opinions, whether he himself is denying the whole thing, saying, I'm not a Nazir at all. So we force him to be a Nazir because where they overlap, we say, look, 2 years, Beis Hillel says 2 years, you definitely have 2 Nazirs and you have to accept. Or we're talking about that the Nazir says one thing, or the Nazir is quiet. He's not contradicting it, he's just quiet. And therefore, again, there's no shtika kaidah here. I mean, who's he being minded to? There's 2 different versions. So therefore, he has to follow whatever the rule outcome is. Says the Gemara that our Mishnah's version is Loikai Tana, does not follow the following Tana. Rabbi Shmuel Benoish Rabbi Yechem and Broika, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Yechem Broika, has a different version. He says, our Mishnah says 2 groups is when they have an argument. If it be one group, 1 against 1, they get canceled according to everybody. This Brisa disagrees the other way around. He says, if you had 2 groups of witnesses, then everyone will agree. And one says, one says 2 Naziris, and one says 5. Everyone agrees that included 5 is 2. And therefore definitely has to keep observed 2 Naziris. When is the argument whether we cancel the Eidos or we still say where they overlap? That's valid testimony. Where they argue, Al Kat Achas on one group. Echad Oimesh Taib, Echad Chaim, one guy says 2, one guy says 5. Beis Shammai says Nechel Kedusim. If it's one group that cancel each other out. Beis Hillel says yes, b'chal chamish time. Even one group they're overlapping, we believe. Amar Rav comes along Rav and makes the following statement: Hakol moedim b'moedim. Everyone agrees b'moedim. If you count, Everyone agrees. What in the world is Rava saying? That Rava is saying everyone agrees if you're counting, they cancel the testimony. Even Beis Hillel would agree. My comment. What's he saying? What's Rav saying? Elam is Rav saying? Echad oimer chamish for loish time. If one person says, sorry, if one group says 5, and the other group and not 2, and the other group says no, it was only 2, and definitely not 5. Of course, they contradict each other. What's the point? Everyone agrees that they cancel each other out. If one person says there are 2 witnesses, right? So if one said 2 and the other one said and not more, and the other one says 5 and not less, then of course they contradict each other. Why would there even be an argument? When he says counting, means as follows: one witness says he said 1, 2. And the other one says sholosh arba chamesh. Other witness said I heard him say 3, 4, or 5. And because he was counting 3, 4, 5, or he's counting 1, 2, 1, 2 means and not more, and 3, 4, 5 means and not less. And that's what he's saying. That everyone agrees in that case. Even they still would agree that they contradict each other. So the Gemara, so Rab Chama said, I don't understand. That's what he's saying. I don't understand. Halamali, maybe when this person said 3, 4, 5, he's still overlapping the one who says 1, 2. How come they didn't mention 1 and 2? That you can say that Chamirta, he's just adding to the first one. What you're saying is, yeah, he said 1, 2, of course, but we're adding 3, 4, 5. They didn't bother to repeat the 1, 2. Who said they're contradicting each other? So the Gemara, he's only saying the Chamirta, but not the Kilta. He's saying what he added on, but not what we agree on, not the easy part. 1 and 2, of course. So who said that Rav is right? Amri Marav in the West, they said Ein Hakasha b'Mayna. They disagree with Rav. They agree with Rav Chama that if they're Mayna, one says 1, 2, one says 3, 4, 5, they're not contradicting each other. Hadna Aloch Misha Amar, and we move on to the next parak. And this is all about where one person latches on to another person. And we already had this a number of times before. Misha Amar, if one person says Hareini Nazir, if Reuben says I'm a Nazir, and his friend Shimon heard Amar, he says Ani and I. And then Levi heard, and he said, "Ba'ani and I." So kulam nazirim, they all become nazirim. Hutur harishan, but if Reuven then decides to unravel his naziris, then hutur kulam. Since all the other ones made their naziris dependent on the first guy, and the first guy, when he was oikel as if he was never nazir in the first place. So number 2, when he said, "Ba'ani, what are you?" Ani what? Because the first guy is no longer nazir, as if he never was a nazir. And Hutter Kulam. But if Hutter Achlan, the third person went to a Rav to be Mataneted, then Achlan Mutter is allowed to. But the Kula Masurin, the first 2 still remain awesome because they're not dependent on the third person. The third person is dependent on the first 2. Omar, case number 2. He said, Hareini Nozir, I'll be a Nozir. Friend heard, but Omar, he says, P ke P, my mouth should be like his mouth. Besare kesare, my ear should be like his ear. Hareza Nozir. We know exactly what he means. He's referring to that he won't cut his hair and he won't drink wine. And even Ab Shimon, who said before that if you only accept one thing, it's not considered Naziris. Here the Rishonim say is different. It's like Yod. It's like you started a statement. You didn't. It's not like you said, I'll be a Nazir only from wine. Then Ab Shimon says, Nazir. Here he's just starting the statement, and therefore it's Yodis. What happens? Hareini Nazir. A man says, "I'll be Nazir." Shoma Ishta, his wife heard. But Amra, she says, "Va'ani and I too." So she's depending on him. Meifir Eshalah, he has a right to cancel hers. But B'Shalai his net still remains because he's not dependent on her. What happens? Case number 2, in the next case, she says, "Hareini Nazir." She initiates it. I'll be a Nazir. B'Shoma by her husband heard. But Amar, and he said, "Va'ani." And I will also be a Nazir. So he's now dependent on her. He can no longer cancel her Nazir. Now, why not? The Gemara in the beginning is going to think the reason why not is because since when he, remember we had a fakir before in the Durham, we're going to have it again here. When a husband annuls the net, when a chacham annuls the net of a person, he's oikel and mafrei, he undermines it because the whole idea of charot is I should never have made it in the first place. Or a Pesach, if I would have known, I never would have made it. So therefore, it's retroactively undone. What happens in the case of a husband with a wife? Is he annulling it also retrospectively, or only from now on? So there's 2 ways of understanding. So if we learn that it's completely undermining it, retrospectively it's been undermined, so then the reason why a husband cannot annul the neder of his wife is because when he knows her neder, her nazir, he also becomes automatically annulled because his Naziris is dependent on hers. And the problem is you cannot annul your own adar. That's why you cannot annul hers. But or maybe I think Mara concludes the husband annuls from now on. So the chayda when she still was a nazir before, and he said I will be, so he's a nazir. But the problem is once he says an I will be, that means he's confirming the nazir as his wife. And once you're mekayim the neder, you cannot then no longer be maker. And we'll discuss this. Hareini nazir. I'll be nazir. What happens? He says I'll be nazir. And then he turns to her and says, what about you? And if she doesn't respond, then obviously she's not. But if she says amen, yes, that means she's confirming it. Mayfer eshalah, he can cancel hers because he's not dependent on her. But v'shaloi kaim, his nether remains. What happens? Hareini nazir, she initiates. I'll be nazir. And then she turns to him and what about you? Well, Amen, he confirms it. He can no longer cancel it, like we said in the second version before. Once he confirms it, he cannot cancel. Says the Gemara, Yosef Reish Lakish Kamed Rabbi Nasiya. So not only Rabbi Yochanan was a student by Rebbe, Reish Lakish was also a student by Rebbe. So Rebbe's once Reish Lakish was a Rebbe, Yosef come and he said the following: when do you say that you could be a Nazir and the other person says Ani Nai? It makes him a Nazir as well. You can latch on. It has to be all within a certain amount of time. The time it takes to say the words, which in this Gemara's version here is clearly Shalom Alecha Rebbe, the 3 words of Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. If your Rebbe comes by, we want you to be able to pause and say that. And in other Gemara, Babakami had Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Meili. We mentioned in Dharma Machlekes Rishonim how many words we say is Teichel Dibur. We said you can always change your mind Teichel Dibur, except in a couple of things, the Kiddush and Gittin and Megadif. You cannot, once you did it, you cannot change your mind. But here we say in a positive way, when Teichel Dibur is, that's when we say that if you said you'll be a Nazir and I say Vani, I'll become a Nazir. The Kama Teichel Dibur, what's considered the time to say the words? Kadeshi Shalom, enough time to say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. Kama, and what kind of Shalom? The Shalom, Shalom Talmid L'Rav. The Shalom that a student says to his Rav, which we say here is Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, as all the Rishonim say here, and so it appears in the Gemara soon. Amalei, so Rebbe said back to him too. He said back to him that then you did not give any space. What about a Talmud? If a Talmud heard someone say no, so he's about to say Vani, and his Rebbe walks by, and he says, it's too late. So we have to give him one more second. In other words, Teichel Dibur plus, if he starts Vani right immediately after Gedibur is good enough. Because if he's a student and he turned around to his Rebbe, it's good enough. Says Gemara, we actually learned like Reish Lakish Dawad, that is Teichel Dibur. It says in the Mishnah, his friend heard B'shah Kedei Dibur. It says the Braisa, and he waited Kedei Dibur. Then we said Va'ani, who Asa v'Chaveda Mutter. The original guy is Asa, but the second guy is Mutter. Sounds clearly like Reish Lakish, not like Rebbe. Sounds like Reish Lakish if he did it within Teichel Dibur, fine, but if he waited till after Kedei Dibur, he does not become a Nazir. The time it takes to ask Shalom Aleichem to your Rebbe. So Leimo l'sayele. Okay, so that's one proof to Reish Lakish, a clear brayso like him. Then Leimo let us say Misayele, support from our Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, Amarei Nazir v'Shalom my friend heard, he said Ba'ani, and then the Mishnah said Ba'ani. A third guy came along, the Sugoi, and the Mishnah does not give any more examples. So therefore, what is he from here? If like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the Mishnah should have said 4 Ba'anis. Ani, 3 anis is Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, and then you want to tell me one more ani, because even if you're a second late, it's good enough. Then I like Reish Lakish that no, 4 anis is no good. So why does the Mishnah mention 2 and not 3? Because everyone, as the Rosh explains, everyone knows what Teichel Dibur is. The moment you tell me that not only the first person becomes, but also the second, then I automatically know. So how many more? 2 Teichel Dibur. I know automatically one more. But according to Rebbe, it's a big chiddush that even beyond the Teichel Dibur, and the Mishnah should have said it. That's what the Gemara wants us to bring as a proof to support the Reish Lakish, that it all has to be within the Teichel Dibur. Says the Gemara, that's not proof. Itana kireichla lechashiv alei, which times going to mention every single possibility. Is like a peddler who mentions everything. Says the Gemara, so why does the Mishnah even say Va'ani? Just say Shama Chaveda Va'ani. Why does the Mishnah even bother to give a third person came along? The Lashmina, and just teaches that you can do hatfasa, you can latch on. Says the Gemara, Hachinami, you're right. The Mishnah had no reason to mention another Ani. About Mishum Diktani Sefer. Because the next part of the Mishnah says, Huter Harishan, if the first person who took on the Naziris decided to be Mata Neder, so then it's as if this person was never a Nazir. Nobody following him, this person's a Nazir. Huter Kulam, but then Huter Achna, the last person became a Nazir. Achna Mutter Bekulan, so the last person is Mutter, but the first people are not Mutter. Kulan, sounds like it's more than one person. Miklal the Ikem Tzayid is more than one person. So therefore, in the beginning of the Mishnah, we want to introduce the fact that there's more than one person. That's why he mentions Va'ani to teach her that. And I guess the Sefer is trying to teach her, as Taisa wants to say, the Sefer is trying to teach you that there's a possibility where some people are mutter and some people are asa. And therefore, you